Hi, folks, and welcome to Off the Page. Today I have Matt Schofield here with me. Is it Schofield correct? I probably should have
Yep,
asked if I pronounced your name correctly.
you
There you
got it.
go.
You got it.
Good deal. Well, thank you so much for coming on. He is the author, writer, everything, owner of Steamroller Man, the new Kickstarter comic book that is out right now. You're going to check out the link in the description here, folks. And we're going to get to that. We're going to get to a few other things. First off, your job. People
Right.
people might know you for your job there. So
Yes.
you are a director animator for The Simpsons.
Yep. I've worked on
That
The Simpsons for 25 years now. So
and
pretty
been there
crazy.
for decades too. So perhaps
Yeah.
people have heard of that. Maybe.
Right. It might be something people have heard of. Yes.
Might be
Yeah.
familiar with that.
Yeah.
So you how did you get into animation? That's what I want to know first off.
Well, it was actually comics that sort of sparked my interest as a little kid. And I grew up wanting to draw comic books for a living. But as you can probably hear from my accent, I'm from Australia. I grew up in Australia, and I had no idea how I was going to get to draw, comics for Marvel or DC. That was my dream when I was a kid, anyway.
Yeah.
And when it came time to, I finished high school, and it came time to sort of decide, like, well, what do I want to do next? There was an art college in my hometown, Brisbane in Australia, that had an animation course, and that was close enough to drawing comics for me. Like,
Right.
if I had been able to find a college course about drawing comics, then I totally would have gone for that.
And
But so an animation course was like the next best thing that I could find, and so I got applied to that, got accepted. So I got a bachelor's degree in visual arts, majoring in animation, and so that's basically what set me on the path of animation. And yeah, I moved to Sydney after I left college because back in those days there were no animation studios in my hometown, so it was kind of ironic that the art college there had an animation degree, but there were no animation studios for the graduating students to get jobs at. They all had to, if they wanted to work in animation, you had to move
you have to move
to
away.
out of town. So I did. I moved to Sydney. I found a job at a small animation studio, and this was like right around the time that Lion King had just come out, like the year before. And so it was just sort of like the right time to be getting into the industry, because around that time, all the movie studios over here in the US started creating their own animation divisions, and there literally weren't enough people in the US to staff all the studios that needed people. So they all started these worldwide talent searches to find anybody who could hold a pencil, basically. And so I sent my portfolio to basically all the studios over here. And I really didn't have a lot of experience. I had only been working in the industry at that point for, I think, 10 months. And so I was kind of lucky to get a job offer on a film called Cats Don't Dance. So I moved over here to LA to work on that in 1996. And so I spent the next few years working in feature animation. And I worked on Cats Don't Dance and Quest for Camelot, and then Iron Giant for Warner Brothers. And then I worked on Prince of Egypt very briefly, just at the very end of that, to help them finish. And after that was when I decided I wanted to try TV animation, to do something different. And so I applied to The Simpsons for a character layout position, and I got the job, and I've been there ever since. And I've sort of moved up through the ranks, and I've done almost every role that there is on the show. I've done, except for background design and background layout artist. I've been a character layout artist. I've been a character designer. I've done animation timing. I've done storyboards, storyboard revisions. I've been an assistant director and an episode director. And for the last 10 years on the show, I've been the supervising storyboard director. So
That's
it.
fantastic. And the thing is, with something like that, with such a long running show, I don't think people realize this. There's such a big struggle. You got to keep it fresh. You got to keep it current. You got to keep moving on. And
Yeah,
you've got to, what was the norm? You got to keep busting it. Like, what's the next level? What's the next level? And
right.
it's hard to keep a show, especially like The Simpsons, the longest running show in history right now, to keep
Yeah.
that show still at the top after so many years is such an awesome achievement right there, because it's not easy. I think people think that there's a winning
No,
formula because you got a a family that everyone's familiar with The Simpsons. They're worldwide, yet still they could have been in the past. The Flintstones had their big heyday too, and now they're kind of
right.
regulated to Cartoon Network, so that's quite an achievement. And I think that story that you say where you've worked in every position just about, that's
Hmm.
true. When you're at a place for 25 years, even spots you say, I'll never work in that division, you do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful to The Simpsons has been such a major part of my career, and I have gotten, just I'm so grateful to have gotten the opportunity to do so many different things on the show and really kind of broaden my skill base. And I've learned a ton. Just my artistic development has really, I've experienced so much artistic growth while working on The Simpsons. So very
Right.
grateful for the experience. Yeah.
And working on each one of those positions make you better at directing and storyboarding and all that stuff too,
Right.
because you've been there, you know the ins and outs, the difficulties of what you asked for. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people today, when they, I'm sounding so old when I say this, grew up back in my day, but it does build character. Well, a lot of people get out of college thinking, I got a degree, I want to be a supervisor. No, you
Right.
need to start, and to be polite, I'm not trying to be old grumpy Gen Xer, and you need to be stick in your place, Gen Zer. I'm just saying that it really makes you a better supervisor, makes you a better leader when you start at the bottom.
Oh yeah,
When
I
you start at the
totally
bottom,
agree. Because
yeah,
you
and it
you
really,
have you have an awareness and an empathy for the people who are in those positions,
exactly.
and you get an understanding of the whole production pipeline as well, so how to make things run as smoothly as possible for everybody involved in the production, um, you know as much as you can as much as you can in your small part of the chain.
Yeah, the cog in the wheel. If the more you know about how everything turns, the better you are. That's exactly right, man. Good words there. So you were influenced at first by comic books. So I gotta ask, which comic books did you read as a kid? Which
Ah,
ones were your favorites?
my favorite comics when I was a kid I was really into the Ann Nesenti, John Romita Jr. Daredevil run. Um, and I liked Uncanny X-Men,
Boy,
and that was around the time that was also around the time that like John Romita Jr. finished on Uncanny X-Men. That was when I first started like collecting comics, and then I think he moved to Daredevil, and then Mark Silvestri took over
yeah.
from him. So I was collecting that run, and then I was really into West Coast Avengers. West Coast Avengers was kind of my favorite comic at the time, and it was sort of like this. It was almost like I liked the underdog kind of nature because it was never like a big seller, and
No, they
this
were
was
the
a
B
comic.
Team Avengers.
Totally. It was exactly. It was the total B team. But I kind of liked that about them. I
See
liked it
that
because not many people were reading it.
that's why I liked X Force. back in the day. Strong Guy, Multiple Man. Those characters, to me, you know, X-Men was the main comic book, and those characters were all iconic. You knew every single one.
Yeah.
But when I started reading, I think my brother got me into X-Force, and I thought, Strong Man, he looks stupid, and all these other people, oh, that looks stupid. But then you read, and it's the characters. Right. It's who they are. It's the storyline. Because I know what you mean. Because I've read some of the West Coast Avengers, and if the writing is there, the writing has to be. And see, as a kid, I didn't appreciate that. I didn't understand. That's what I liked about it. You know, I was just chasing after my favorite artist. Right. But then I started realizing pretty soon that, man, this run was good, but this was not. What's the difference? It's the story. Yeah. It's the person behind it that's writing it, and it really makes a big difference. And you can take the smallest character, the B, C level characters, and make them fun as long as they're written with. Like Guardians of the Galaxy. Holy crow. Right. If they pitched that as a movie to me 10 years ago, I'd been like, you're great. The what? Right. The who? Yeah. But you got a good writer, you got a good actors, you get a good cast together, and you got a great movie. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So it makes a big difference. Okay, so Marvel got you into it. All right. Yeah. I was also reading John Byrne's Superman run, I should say, at the same time, which I loved. Like that, from that moment on, John Byrne was like my favorite artist. And so when he moved on to do, I think he did like a 14-issue run on West Coast Avengers, I thought, because I was already reading West Coast Avengers, aligned, and then say. Yes, and then like when my favorite artist came on to my favorite comic, I just thought like, oh my God, yes, exactly. Like the stars aligned, and I was like, this is too good to be true. And yeah, it was fantastic. Like I remember when I first saw that issue, I was like, what? John Byrne? West Coast Avengers? I can't believe it. It was great. That is hilarious. That is hilarious. All right, so you're working on The Simpsons. Yep. You've already got some humor instilled into you because you've been surrounded by it for so many decades. Yep. You have a love for comic books. Mm-hmm. How do these two get together and make the baby idea that is Steamroller Man? Where did the concept come from? Concept came from, it's funny you say a baby idea, because it came from one of my babies, my son. He came up with the name Steamroller Man when we were I was kind of having a conversation with my kids around the dinner table, and we were coming up with just kind of random superhero names. And my son said, "What about Steamroller Man?" And a light bulb went off in my imagination, and I immediately had this vision of this guy with a huge steel roller with a face on it as his head. And that was Steamroller, that was Steamroller Man was already formed in my imagination at that moment. And it was around the same time that I basically decided, because I'd always wanted to, really make my own comic. Every time I would go to a comic convention and I would, meet small press creators who were doing their own thing, I'd always come away really inspired and think like, yeah, I should do my own comic. I really want to do my own comic one day. But it was always, one day. I never kind of got around to doing it. And so it just sort of happened that the timing coincided with that conversation with my kids, that I sort of just realized, through a series of things that were happening in my life at the time, I kind of became aware of how short life is, and how, became aware of my own mortality. And so I just decided, like, if I want to do it, I just got to do it. Like, now is the time to do it. And so I just thought, well, I want to do a comic and I should do something with this character. And so I started just coming up with gags, basically, that what would a superhero that had this giant steel roller for a head, like, what would be the implications of that? And so the gags just started kind of creating themselves out of, just thinking about, like, well, what could funny situations be with that
with that premise. So
And I have to say, if anyone wants to check it out, again, it's on Kickstarter, but you can also go to steamrollerman.com, see the digital comics for
yep.
themselves. Even the very first, I remember when my brother was the one that put me on to, he said, "Hey, you've got to see this. You're going to love it."
Nice.
And so I started reading. I was like, "This is freaking hilarious. Who is this?" I didn't know who you were or what was going on. I said, "This is great."
Right.
It gave me those old school The Tick vibes.
Yeah.
You
Very
know,
influenced by the Tick. Yeah.
comedic character. Oh, I mean, you can tell. I mean, it is in the vein of the Tick. It's that perfect balance of, the character's playing it straight and hilarious circumstances are surrounding him. And even if everyone, I think it's issue 0, is it? They saves the cat from the tree.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, I was crying.
Oh wow.
Like,
That's
man,
good. Thanks.
this is so good, and so your humor is so witty.
Oh, thank you.
It's so witty. I really think it takes a lot to have that. It's that quirky, and when people read this, they're going to see what I'm saying. And folks, you can read it all. It's right there. It's right there. So if you just want a printed copy, this is where you're going to Kickstarter, and you're going to want one because it's got that perfect storm of just it's great art, by the way. Great art.
Thank you.
I take the time and looked over it, and it's one of those things you want to stare at the page. It's so detailed at times. It's a lot of action. It's great. There's hilarious characters. Night, and
right.
I am just loving every single one of these characters. And like I said, it's this. It's ridiculous, but you're interested. You're invested in each one of these characters.
That's awesome. Thanks.
The Candyman, sir. Man,
yeah.
There's just so many of these. Now that I know that your son was the idea man. How often have we dug into that gold mine of his and say, who else does Steamroller Man fight? Has he contributed in other ways?
Yeah, well, the gingerbread golem that Sugar Daddy makes, that was initially suggested by my son because he said, "Oh, what about a character that's like a cookie, like a giant cookie?" And so then I thought, well, what if he's a giant gingerbread man? And then I just kind of developed that by adding the elements of like the golem from Jewish folklore, because they usually would make a golem out of clay. And I thought, well, what if it's a guy who, he's this candy maker, but he's like an evil Willy Wonka type, and he makes a giant gingerbread man as like his heavy kind of henchman character. So that's where that came from.
The heart candy is the thing. Man, it's just, see, that's what I'm talking about. Just the creativeness about that. And folks, this is rated E for everyone, as gamers say.
Totally. Yep.
I mean, anyone can enjoy this. Your kids can enjoy it. And I think they will, because again, it's the humor's there that even a kid can love it, enjoy it, laugh at some of the jokes, and just be enamored with this world that you've built with him. And I gotta say, bravo, hitting that right spot, because we need that type of humor that is very hard to pull off. It's very hard to pull off, and you've reached a perfect balance of that. How far ahead did you have this story thought out? That's another question I have, because it seems very well planned. If you're running off the cuff and say, we'll see what the next adventure does, then you're doing excellent.
Well, funny you should ask. When I first started the story, I didn't have it planned out at all. That first story with the cat in the tree, I literally did not know where that was going. I just dove in and started the first page, and then it was a process of every time I finished a page, I would just be like, okay, now what's going to happen? And what could happen next? And then I realized, people started asking me like, are you going to print this? It's really cool. And when I was like, yeah, I'd like to print it. But then once I started investigating, okay, how much does it cost to print things? Then I realized, if you're going to print something and you want to get a quote, you've got to tell them how many pages your story is going to be. And because I was just going and going without really knowing how it was going to end, that's when I realized, oh, okay, I got to bring this story, I got to wrap this up.
To close, yeah.
And so, yeah, so then I resolved the cat in the tree story. And then I decided,
that is one of the best endings ever.
oh, good. I'm glad you liked it.
I don't want to spoil it because I want
don't
people
spoil
to read
it.
it.
Don't spoil it.
I'm not going to spoil it because I think people need. It starts off as your generic Superman saving a cat. This is what it reminded me of, with
Right.
a great little twist.
Oh, it's awesome.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So then the next story, I knew the story beats. So the story with Sugar Daddy and the Gingerbread Golem, I knew where the story was going to start, and I knew sort of the main turning points in the story, and I knew where I wanted it to end. But that was about it. I still don't work from a script. I just have an outline, and I'll usually just work a few pages ahead, like a few pages at a time. And I know what has to happen for that section of the story. And so then I just thumbnail it. And that's where I start working out, like, okay, how much of this action can I fit on one page? How many pages is this going to take? So I like working like that because I think that helps with the comedy. Because I think, at least for me, like, the comedy comes more easily to me if I'm just kind of almost doing improv as I'm creating, and coming up with the story, and then thinking like, okay, how can I add some jokes to this moment in the story? And sometimes those jokes kind of take the story in a completely different direction. Like Night Night and Sleep Tight weren't originally part of the story.
Oh,
That was,
wow.
I added them because I'd come up with them, and I was thinking like, oh, these are funny characters. I want to do another comic with them one day.
Oh,
But
that
then
would be
I
great.
just decided, like, I want to introduce them into Steamroller Man, and Steamroller Man can kind of become not just about him, but about the whole city of Kurtzburg and the whole world. And I can have the city populated with some of these other characters that I've come up with. And so that was bringing Night Night and Sleep Tyke in. Was I kind of just needed something else to sort of
have the story progress.
Exactly. And
yeah.
I really, at that point, I was actually experiencing writer's block. Like I felt like I'd kind of written myself into a corner at that point. And I did an online workshop with Mark Wade, the comic writer.
Yeah.
About basically just writing comics. And it was great because, he gave his class, and then at the end you got to ask questions. And so I asked him a question about writer's block, which I was experiencing at the time, and his answer was, in his experience, writer's block was your subconscious telling you that you're trying to make the story go in a place it doesn't want to go. So what he would do at that point was forget about where he thought he was going with the story and try and just think of something complete, like take the story in a complete left turn and come up with something completely different from where you were originally going with it. And so that was when I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna have Steamroller Man meet these other heroes, and it transformed the story, and it became more about a group kind of dynamic, as well as like this rivalry between Steamroller Man and Night Night. And so it added a lot more depth to the story, as well as more opportunities for comedy as well between, with the relationship between them.
It gives Steamroller Man someone to bounce off of and relate
Right.
to and converse with.
Yeah.
And, his silliness can shine through now with someone's the anchor, the other's as the common man, how classic comedy works. And that's
Exactly.
and they balance each other out well.
Yeah.
It's funny because an author, Michael Stackpole, I talked to him. He does Pathfinder, Star Wars, stuff like that. And
cool.
He had said literally the same thing. I took his writer's workshop, and he had said that when you're writing characters, characters can get off the page and run away in a different direction than what you wanted them. And the goal is, don't force them to the goal you had, because they, as you start writing, you're like thinking, you know what? My hero would not do this.
Right.
The way I'm writing him now, he wants to do this. So let's go this way. It's almost exactly as Mark weighed to you. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. I found it really interesting and incredibly helpful at that time. So yeah, it was great.
I know what you mean, because when you have this outline, you're thinking, okay, I got my point A, here's what I want, and here's where I want to end. But then it just doesn't always go that way. And you get frustrated, like, well, now what do I do? But that's how writers work.
Right.
You go around with it. So that's very interesting. Now, the comic book industry has changed and altered a lot in the past 10 years or so.
Yeah, for sure.
Where comic books back in our day, early 90s, mid 90s and stuff like that, when I was collecting as well, everyone had a comic book store. Didn't matter how small a town. If you were in a small town, you had one. You had one comic book store.
Right.
And hobby cards, sports cards were big too. I used to work in college in the late 90s. I was working at a card and comic shop.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Very rarely people will ever have to claim, because now that's just very rare when you have someone that works in a comic book store.
Right.
But, that was back in the height of the comic book industry, baseball cards, sports cards, everything was booming. Beanie Babies.
Yeah.
We were even selling those back in the day.
Yep.
And now we have a turn of how media turns. Of course, people are cord cutting now. Everything's going streaming. A lot of things are going streaming.
Yep.
We're just seeing our world change. Probably that change was accelerated during COVID. Possibly we kind of redirected how we consume media. And comic books is also, even though I think it started before COVID for comic books, but now there is a lot of success and there's a lot of interest in Kickstarter projects like yourself, where it used to be the only way. It's ridiculous for you to start a comic book on your own. It will fail. It will never get publicity. It will never get traction. You have to go to one of the big two, or Image and Dark Horse, at least get into some of those top tier guys just to get your following, and then create your own thing. But now you don't have to do that. Now the preferred method, because you see Kickstarters for books coming out. I just backed Jeff Smith's his early Bone strip, comic book strips they did for his college. I just recently backed those last year. And cool. He's already got a big name for himself, but that's the medium he went with. He could have gone back to Image, Dark Horse, and they would have instantly granted him a copy. He said, no, I can do this on my own now.
Yeah.
I don't need that. Yeah. And I think it's a medium that a lot of people prefer, because now instead of having to wait for the big two, the comic book sales have gone down. You can make up any reasons for why that is. There's a lot of speculation. Mm-hmm. But the point is, they're not giving the fans exactly what they want. And now when they go to Kickstarter, just like in streaming, they can pick what they want. And there's a lot of creative people and a lot of creative ideas that are out there now.
Absolutely.
Even a lot of authors. Brandon Sanderson broke Kickstarter.
I saw that. That was crazy.
Good grief. Good grief. I like him too, but
talk about
that was awesome. It warms my heart when a book does well. I'm glad people still know what reading is.
Yeah, me too.
Because that seems to be a lost art too. And but the thing is, though, I'm glad that people are able to pick these things, and you can actually gain a lot of traction here. And you're providing, I think, the book. And by the way, if anyone doesn't know, it funded in 40 minutes, the first 40 minutes. It is doing gangbusters right now. It's still got 2 weeks to go. And you're still not done with Kickstarter goals. You have
still trying to come up with I wasn't really prepared for
I know
its early success. I had these goals ready, but I'm sort of
you've blown through your goals.
Yeah, blowing through them so quickly.
10 times your asking price. Right. Yeah, but see, that just shows you that people, they look at this, they say, hey, this is good. And just like my brother told me, and I'm telling everyone else, hey, did you see that it's word of mouth and it's spreading over the internet faster than it ever would have 10 years ago, where none of these would have been on Kickstarter. The old rule would have been you had to go to one of the big publishers.
Yeah.
That's great. I saw the video of you when you first received a printed copy.
Oh,
I think you're
yeah.
getting a
Yeah.
little printed copy,
Yeah. Put
and
that
I
on the
love your
Kickstarter
face. I
page.
love that you did that reaction video because that, like, wow, this is so cool. This is
Hmm.
real. What was that feeling like for you?
It was magical. As I said in the video, which is, as you said, I put it on the Kickstarter campaign page because I wanted to sort of share that moment with everybody. But yeah, it was the realization of an almost lifelong dream. I'd been wanting to make my own comics since I was 13 years old or so. So it's about 40 years later now. So it's something that I had
That
always been saying, like, I'm going to do that one day. One day I'm going to do it, and I finally did it. So yeah, it was fun
right.
to get that moment on camera, because it was definitely a special moment in my life, really. So yeah, it was
Absolutely.
amazing, an
Childhood
amazing
dreams.
feeling. Yeah,
What kid back
exactly.
in the day didn't want to? I mean, I wanted to draw comic books and I wanted to play baseball for the Mets. That, you at least got one of those achieved.
Well, I would say, in just in reference to what you were just saying about Kickstarter, the great thing about Kickstarter is that it does put that in reach of everybody now who
Mhm.
wants to make their own comic book. It's possible, and you don't have to go through a gatekeeper like a publishing company. You can do it yourself. And you talking about Jeff Smith, I think that's very telling, because somebody with that level of success already under his belt, as you said, decided not to go back to Scholastic, or one of
Yeah.
the big
One of the big
publishers.
publishers. And he could have
He
gotten the
went
contract immediately.
direct. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's like, his success in the kids, the young adult graphic novel market, that's what all the publishers are chasing. So
Exactly.
any one of those publishing companies would open their doors for him in a heartbeat. But the fact that he chose to go with Kickstarter, I think, is a sign that, yeah, Kickstarter is definitely like this new force in publishing. Certainly in the comic space, I think personally that some of the most interesting stuff in comics is coming out of crowdfunding. Not only Kickstarter, but you've got Indiegogo, and you've got Zoop,
Yeah.
and you've got Crowdfunder. But just the crowdfunding space, I think there's so much creative stuff being done now by just people you've never heard of, and then you see stuff on Kickstarter and you're like, oh my god, this looks amazing. So
Yeah. They got the
it's
talent.
great.
They got the story that interests you the most.
Right.
And it's something that in today's world, just like publishers don't take a chance on something new anymore. They just don't anymore.
Exactly.
It's a
Exactly.
sad world on their side. I understand. You got to publish what makes you got to. We can't afford to make a misstep in this. We
Right.
got to get the hits. We got to get like every publisher, they want the next Harry Potter series,
Yeah.
and that's what they're looking for. And that's all. And
Yeah.
that's sad that that's all they're looking for, because they're passing up. I got a lot of great stories that you
Hmm.
never know what will. I mean, we talked about Simpsons always evolving and changing. The publishing industry needs to make some. They need to look themselves in the mirror and start changing and say, hey, maybe we need to try something. It's okay to fail a little bit. I know you're
Right.
running a tight ship these days, but in comic books too, I think they need to try more. They've lost a lot of their fans for one reason or the other, haven't connected with them. There's
Hmm.
great ideas. There's a lot of talented artists like yourself and others.
Yep.
They're going on Kickstarter and they're just putting these other books to shame. And I wish that even the comic book industry, which is strained right now as a business, not as popular as it
Hmm.
was back in the 90s, but I
Yeah.
think it's time to open up your mind and say, hey, look, there's some great ideas out there. But you're
Totally.
right, because right now, all crowdfunding is the way to go. And it's where a lot of comic book fans have already migrated to. It's already
Yeah.
happened. They're
Yeah.
looking out for there's YouTubers covering the latest Kickstarters for comic books. And yeah, here's what you need to know.
Right.
It's this
Yeah.
whole fandom that is constantly looking at it. And I've been swept up in it too. I won't lie. I've gotten a few books from actually, more than crowdfunding than I've been to the comic book store before, because you
Oh,
get to
wow.
choose and see. Well, it's just like
Yeah.
creative ideas like your own and others
Yep.
that are like, wow, that is right up my alley, and I don't see that in today's comic books now.
Right.
So it is a wonderful medium that has been created that, like you said, anyone with the talent and creativity can come up with an idea, pitch it on Kickstarter, and get the interest and word out to millions. It's excellent.
Absolutely. Yep. It's true.
So what you talked about your son? He was the one that named him. What's he
Hmm.
think of all this? That Steamroller Man is actually a character now, has his own comic book. Is he over the moon about this? Does he get first was it first read through? He gets
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
script approval go through him?
Well, in a way, like my kids are my test audience, and I always sort of, especially if I come up with a joke for a page that I'm working on, but I'm not quite sure, like, is this funny? I don't know. Like, I think it's kind of funny, but here, have a look at this. And so they're always like the first people I show it to if I'm not sure of where I'm going with the joke or something. Yeah, I think both my sons are pretty pleased to see that I've kept going with the comic, because I initially started it as a web comic, and knowing that the goal was always to get it into print, but yeah, I was publishing it online for 6 years. Since 2018 I started putting it online, and so my kids have seen the whole journey, and so yeah, I think they're pretty pleased with how it's gone, and to see it kind of come to life like it is.
So are they drawing too?
Yeah, both my sons are pretty
Yeah,
talented artists. I look at what
that's
they
awesome.
do at their age, and because personally, like, I didn't really get serious about drawing until I was about 16.
Hmm.
But they've been drawing since they were young, and like little kids, and yeah, they're amazing artists, both of them. I'm actually like, my oldest son does these really cool like ballpoint pen drawings, like the really well rendered ballpoint
Yeah.
pen. And so I'm talking to him at the moment about like possibly doing a variant cover for the second issue of the comic when I do a Kickstarter for that. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
we'll see. He's in college now, so he's kind of
Oh,
busy,
okay.
but we'll
He's kind
see.
of busy. He'll
Yeah.
put you on hold, Dad. You can talk
Yeah,
to his secretary. He'll schedule some time.
exactly. Yeah,
I got it.
exactly.
Speaking of alternate covers, you do have some artists who contributed some beautiful
Yeah,
alternate covers there. Tell
yeah,
me a little bit about how
absolutely.
you got those authors involved. I mean, writers involved.
Yeah,
Writers,
so
gracious artists.
John Boy Myers, who is a pretty high profile and successful artist in the mainstream comic industry. He's drew a run of Teen Titans for DC. He drew a run of Venom, I believe, for Marvel. He drew Spawn for a while for Todd McFarlane at Image. He does a lot of cover work now. I just got to know him from attending comic conventions, and he was actually, I kind of think of him as the godfather of Steamroller Man, because when I first met him, we were at WonderCon here in California, and we just sort of struck up a conversation, and I asked him like, "Hey, can I ask you a question just as get some advice, because you're a comic professional?" And I said, "Look, I've been working on my own comic. I've got about 12. That was when I had just done the first story with the cat in the tree." And I said, like, I don't really know like what to do with it. Like, some people are saying like put it online, but I don't know anything about like making a website. I was also thinking maybe I should just do a little mini comic photocopied thing, or maybe print on demand. And he was like, well, why don't you just put it on Facebook? And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, you set up a page for your comic that would be the name of the comic, and you just upload the pages as images like you would a photo on your personal page. And I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And he was like, yeah, just look it up. And he said, like, yeah, once you get it set up, if you want, you can just send me a message on Facebook, and I'll share the link to the page with my followers on Facebook. And I was like, oh wow, really? You do that? And he was like, yeah, sure. And so I followed his advice, and I set up a Facebook page and put it up. And then I did message him, and he was absolutely true to his word and shared the page with his followers. So I think I got about probably my first like 50 or so followers for the Steamroller Man Facebook page just from him sharing that with his followers. And I've gone back to, I catch up with him every time we go to a comic convention that he's there. I catch up with him. And so he, and I always thank him profusely for, like, if it wasn't for you, I never would have even put it online. And from there, it kind of grew. And so he was also the one who suggested doing a Kickstarter. And at that point, I was like, oh, I don't know. I've heard that Kickstarters are a lot of work, and I don't know the first thing about Kickstarter. And, I was thinking maybe I would just set up just print on demand, and I'd just set up an Etsy store or something. And he was like, no, don't do print on demand. You have to do a Kickstarter. And I was like, oh, okay, but why? Why is that? And he said, you're going to find that people will find you will find a whole new audience on Kickstarter that you wouldn't, you would have to try so hard to get people to notice your print on demand comic. Kickstarter, right. You've already got the traffic there. So I was like, oh, okay. So then it was another couple of years of visiting him at comic conventions, and he would ask me, like, how's that Kickstarter going? Like, I haven't seen anything. What are you doing? I was like, oh, like, I've been busy and it's a lot of work, and there's a lot to organize. And he was like, look, get going on this. And he actually said, like, look, what if I do a cover for you? And I was like, oh no. Well, yeah, okay, then I'll definitely do it. Because if you're offering to do a cover, then yes, okay. And so that was when I really got serious about doing it. And yes, I'm really grateful to him because his cover looks amazing.
Oh, it does. It looks fantastic. That's funny that he is the one that got you out of bed and motivated you to do your Rocky montage training scene where you're trying to put this comic together. Absolutely. He was the one motivating you. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
And that he volunteered to do that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
You also have go ahead.
Yeah. And so, well, I was just going to say, like, the other two covers, right. Sam Grinberg is, he's a character designer on The Simpsons, but he's also been doing his own comics independently for quite a few years now. I've been really impressed with his comic work since I found out he was, doing comics. It's fun when you're working with someone and you both kind of are like, oh, you do comics too? Oh, cool.
We share the same hobbies too.
Yeah, exactly. So that was sort of like a natural thing where I asked him, like, oh, would you be interested in, like, doing a cover for Steamroller Man when I get the Kickstarter going? And he was like, oh, I'd love to. That'd be fun. Yeah, I'd love to do it. And so I thought his style is very alternative, kind of punk, band poster, record cover type looking style, which I really love his style. And I wanted to see what it would look like when he drew one of my characters. So I asked him, could you do a cover, but with the Steve Rollerman persona, where he's got the big glasses, not the superhero version, but the civilian identity version? And yeah, he knocked it out of the park. His cover looks fantastic. So, And then the other cover is by Ruben Esteban Perez. And Ruben is a friend of my son's, who he went to high school with my son, and they connected because they were both into comics. And Ruben has been posting fan art drawings on Instagram and TikTok for a few years now. And so he's got this, he's got a following of like 150,000 followers. And I've always loved his style of art. I think of it as like, it's sort of like a blending of like all your favorite Saturday morning cartoon superheroes.
Well, that's what you can tell from this one.
Yeah. So he did this cool, like almost like a Batman the Animated Series style thing with like the red cloud sky in the background and the lightning strike, and he's standing on a gargoyle. So yeah, I love Ruben's cover, and yeah, that was another. I just really liked his artwork, and I had a connection with Ruben through my son, and so I just asked Ruben, like, would you be interested in doing an alternate, a variant cover for my Kickstarter? And he jumped at the chance and was really happy to do it. So yeah, that's the story of the variant covers. Yeah.
What's great is you found 3 artists with 3 different styles, 3 unique styles.
Yeah, that's what I love about them.
Give you different portrayals of Steamroller Man like you've never seen him before, and it's just so good. So yeah, all right. So they can check you out on the Kickstarter.
Yep.
On steamrollerman.com.
Yep.
Where else are we? We have Facebook.
Yeah, so
Steamroller Man.
Kickstarter is, you can just go to kickstarter.steamrollerman.com. I have that short URL. It'll take you right there. And then steamrollerman.com is my website where I've got everything that I've done so far. Every page that I've done so far is up there to read for free. I've got, as we were talking about before, there's the issue 0, which is the first story. And then there's issue 1, which is what we're doing the Kickstarter for. There's also issue 2, that's complete. And I'm halfway through issue 3. And all my social media links and everything, you can go to linktree/steamrollerman. And I've got a YouTube channel. I've got Facebook and X, Twitter, Instagram, all those things. So
everything. Look how hip you are with today's culture. I'm telling you what, he's got it all, folks. He's got it all. Well, that's awesome. That's awesome, folks. Again, check it out. I'm putting the Kickstarter link in the comments here. Definitely check out Mr. Schofield's excellent idea. Read it. Read the digital versions. Enjoy it, and definitely get it. You have a little less than 2 weeks.
Yeah,
that's okay, because there's going to be tons of stretch goals. We even know what the stretch goals are yet, because we haven't gotten there yet. But there's going to be some wonderful stretch goals. I'm positive of it.
So far, the stretch goals are free digital. I'm giving four free digital comics, which are by other independent creators who have also done Kickstarters, and they're comics that I've personally curated because I feel like they've got a similar vibe to Steamroller Man, and so I think my readers will really like them. The most recent one that we just unlocked was a trading card, like a 90s style trading card. So you'll get that as part of it. And I'm actually going to print a mini comic version of that first story to go as a stretch goal bonus as well. So those are a few of the stretch goals. And I should say, while before we finish, those variant covers are only going to be available during the Kickstarter campaign. So once the campaign is fulfilled, I won't be printing those versions ever again. So if you want, if you're a fan of any of those artists and you want a print copy with those covers, now's the time to do it in the next 2 weeks, because otherwise you'll have to. The only way you can be able to get them will be on the collector's market, where
it'll be jacked up prices. You don't want to pay scalpers prices, folks.
Right.
You want the Kickstarter exclusive covers. Looking at the covers, they look excellent. That your comic book has already been the success it has on Kickstarter, my hat's off to you. I think that's awesome. It's awesome that you're achieving this dream that you had when you were 13 years old,
Yeah.
reading, cracking open a comic book, and now here you are among the list of people who have been successful now in bringing this out, and that's going to be great. Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Matt. I've had a blast.
All right, folks. So there you have it. Again, Kickstarter link in the description below. Go check it out. Steamroller Man, Matt Schofield. We will see you next time and on Off the Page.